Hello everyone and welcome to Sorla's Let's Play Warhammer Online series. In this first video we'll be discussing the classes in Warhammer and just a bit the very basics of the game itself. In the second part of this video we'll be making a character and playing for the first couple of levels, so if you already know about the game and just are interested in seeing it again, just skip on to the next video and you'll get into the action there. If you're new to the game or you kind of were curious about it, then stay with me here and we'll talk about the classes and just give you some very basic information about the game in case you're interested. So this game is a very PvP dominated game. There is PvE in it, it's just not done that much. The main focus of it is PvP, or in this game it's called RVR. That stands for realm versus realm. That doesn't refer to servers, it's just realm of order and realm of destruction. So in the realm of order we have the dwarves, the empire and the high elves, and then in the realm of destruction we have dark elves, chaos and greenskins. So first off we'll be taking a look at the dwarves. Now the dwarf healer is the rune priest. Now I should note that every character works off a pool of action points. Now I think it's about 100 action points that you have, and your abilities cost action points to use. Every class has a special mechanic which makes their class unique, and some of the classes have their mechanics kind of almost give them a second bunch of action points that they can work off. The special mechanic for the rune priest are runes. So basically they can put them on the ground, they can put them on friends, they can put them on enemies, and they'll have different effects. Like on enemies it will do damage, say ones on the ground will maybe give an armor buff, or like they'll do a bit of AoE healing and that kind of thing. So they're fun, they're quite a mobile character. So if you enjoy kind of healing on the go, a rune priest are probably one for you. Next up is the dwarf tank called the Ironbreaker. These guys are probably my personal favourite. They're a lot of fun to play. Their special mechanic is the grudge system. Basically anytime the Ironbreaker takes damage he'll build 5 grudges, but he can then use those grudges to fuel some of his other abilities. So in essence it's kind of like a second bunch of action points that he can use to just keep going. Tanking in Warhammer is very viable, especially in RVR, because you have this ability called Guard, and Guard reduces the damage that your guarded target takes by 50%. So normally you place Guard on a healer, and it just means the healer will stay alive a bit longer and you absorb that damage. Next up is the Slayer. These guys are melee DPS for the dwarves. If you know anything about the Warhammer lore, you'll know that these guys are dwarves who have failed an oath or broken an oath, and they've made a new vow to the gods, basically to redeem themselves heroically in battle, mainly by dying, by fighting a dragon or something like that. And basically this is what's going to happen to you if you play a Slayer. You'll pump out a huge amount of damage, but the mechanic means that your armor is reduced. So the mechanic in Rage increases the damage that you do the more enraged you get, but it also reduces your armor. So when you're at the top of the enrage bar, you have, I think it's a 15% damage increase, but it also reduces your armor by 15%. So it's a bit of balance. You kind of, if the Slayers have healers, they're just amazing. If not, then they can die quite easily. Next up is the ranged DPS. These guys, the engineers, their special mechanic are turrets and gadgets. So they can drop down 4 different turrets, and the turrets do different abilities, or have different abilities even. They run around with guns and big wrenches, and they can do fairly decent single target DPS, but they can also throw grenades which kind of do an AoE dot, which is quite handy. Next up in the Empire, we'll be looking at the Empire's melee DPS character, the Witch Hunter. This guy is the very basic rogue. He runs around in stealth and works off combo points. And while the game itself is designed for group combat in mind, the Witch Hunter and the Destruction Mirror, the Witch Elf, are very good at just appearing out of nowhere, smashing down the target and then just disappearing again. So these guys, if you're a healer or you're just kind of a ranged DPS, these guys will pretty much ruin your day. Next up is the Bright Wizard. These guys are the kind of the fire mages of the game, and they're a glass cannon. They will pump out huge amounts of damage, but their mechanic, combustion, means that the higher their combustion rate, and you build combustion by using your abilities, the higher your combustion rate, it means the higher your crit chance is, but it also increases the crit damage that you do as well. However, you have at 100% combustion, you have a 35% chance to damage yourself with each ability that you use. So if you're not careful, you will end up killing yourself while pumping out huge amounts of damage that they do. And the healer for the Empire is the Warrior Priest. Now, these guys have heavier armor than the other healers in game, and it means that they can kind of get up close and personal while they're healing. Their mechanic is called Righteous Fury. Now, all their heals cost Righteous Fury, but their melee abilities build back Righteous Fury. So you can, if done right, you can be a melee healer, though the majority of healer warrior priests kind of choose for the more specialized healing, where they drop the two-handed hammer and they just have a small hammer. So they just have a one-handed hammer and they have a book. And the book, the offhand, increases your Righteous Fury regeneration rate. So you can hang at the back and heal. And if you really want to chance it, you can just run up and start beating people across the head and healing that way. The Knight of the Blazing Sun is the tank for the Empire. These guys are very kind of just standard tanks. Their mechanics are called commands. They're very similar to, say, like a battle shout or something like that. They have about 6 of them that they can use, and it affects their whole party. So a good Knight of the Blazing Sun will be swapping through his commands, because once you change a command, it stays on the Knight of the Blazing Sun and your party members for 12 seconds. So you can have about three of these lingering effects on you at all time, which is pretty good. And now we'll just check out the High Elves. So the High Elf healer is called the Archmage. They have a very unique healing mechanic. Anytime they cast a healing spell, it reduces the cast time of their DPS spells, and it increases the effectiveness of their instant cast DPS abilities, while at the same time casting DPS spells reduces the cast time of their healing abilities. So it is kind of unique, and maybe if you're going for a DPS Archmage, you can kind of heal yourself every now and then instantly, which is quite nice. The Swordmaster is the High Elf tank. Now, normally you'll see them just running around with the two-handed weapons. You can tank with a two-handed weapon, just not as effectively if you have a sword and shield. Their mechanic, the Blade Dance, is just sword balance. So you start off in a normal balance, and then your abilities in that normal balance bring you into an improved balance, which then lets you use certain abilities in the improved balance state, which then can bring you back down to normal balance, or they can bring you up to a perfect balance. And in perfect balance, you'll have some of the more hard-hitting abilities for the class. So you build yourself up to this perfect balance in a rotation, and then you go back down again and then back up again. The ranged DPS class for the elves is the Shadow Warrior. These guys are your very standard archer. The mechanic is basically these 3 different stances that they have. The first one increases the range of all their abilities. The second is kind of a melee focused stance, where maybe the kiting that you thought you were going to do didn't really work as well as you planned it, and you find yourself in a melee situation. You can the abilities in that stance kind of let you get out of that and do a little bit of damage while you're there. And the last stance is the Skirmisher stance, and this is basically the kiting stance, and all the abilities in the Skirmisher stance build up or activate while you're running. So you can be running around and you can be activating these abilities, which is quite nice. Lastly, we have the White Lion. Now these guys are melee DPS for the elves, and they're burst DPS. Their mechanic is a tamed lion. So at level 1 you have a lion that follows you around the place, and the 2 of you run around and do loads of damage. Your lion increases in size every 10 levels. So at level 40 or rank 40, you will have a very big line who is armored, and the two of you look pretty badass. So there are all the Empire classes. So we'll be looking at the mirrors now on the Destruction realm. So we'll take a look at the Dark Elves first. The Witch Elf is the Destruction version of the Witch Hunter. Now you can only have a female Witch Elf, you can't have a male Witch Elf. But they work exactly the same as the Witch Hunters. Next up we have the Sorceress. Now these guys are the Destruction's version of the Bright Wizard. Their mechanic works exactly the same as Combustion. They're more kind of like a Frost Mage rather than Fire Mage though. The Blackguard is the Destruction's version of the Ironbreaker. Their mechanic Hatred works exactly the same as the Grudge system, so anytime you take damage or your Oath Friend takes damage, you build Hatred. Then the Disciple of Cain is the Destruction's version of the Warrior Priest. They can do DPS with the 2 swords, or they can change one of those swords for a Chalice, which increases the regeneration rate of their fury. Next up is Chaos. The Chaos Chosen is basically the Destruction version of the Knight of the Blazing Sun. Their curses work exactly the same way as the commands. They're pretty good tanks, and they look pretty huge when they're armored up properly. The Marauder is supposed to be the mirror of the White Lion, except they don't have a pet, they have these mutations. So we'll just click on him again, and you can see his arm turns into a big claw there. And the mutations have different effects, like armor penetration and crit and that kind of thing. Now you can only have male Chosen and Marauders, you can't have female Chosen and Marauders. So if we click on the Mages, which is the next class, we click female, you see the Chosen and Marauders are removed from view. So the Mages is the mirror for the Engineer. Their turrets are demons. They have a very unique model where they're always on this disc. They never actually come off it. Their mount is just a bigger disc, and every 10 levels their disc changes appearance, which is kind of cool. The Zealots are the mirror for the Rune Priest, and their dark rituals works exactly the same way as the runes. You can place them on people, place them on the ground, and that kind of thing. Lastly now we have the Greenskin. So the Choppa is basically the mirror for the Slayer. They pump a huge amount of damage, but they can be quite easy to kill when they're berserking. The Black Orc is the mirror for the Swordmaster. Their mechanic Brawling is exactly the same as the kind of balance system. The Squig Herder is the mirror for the Shadow Hunter. So instead of having stances, they have different squigs, which are pets, but the different squigs affect their abilities and their range and all that kind of stuff. And lastly we have the Shaman. This is the mirror for the Archmage. Now you'll see quite a lot of the Shamans, they're quite popular, and their abilities work the same. So damaging spells reduce the cast some of their healing spells, and vice versa. So that's basically the classes in Warhammer Online. The max level is 40, and the max PvP level or renowned rank is 100. So that's basically just a kind of just general idea of Warhammer and the classes. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any feedback or questions you want to ask me, please do. In the next video, we'll be jumping into the character creation screen, and we'll be making our character, and we'll be playing for the first couple of levels. So thank you very much for watching, and see you in the next video.